Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing? I hope everybody's good. And we are back live with another English stream. And I hope I'm channeling or I'm streaming it on Unveiling Faith, which was the plan earlier, probably a couple of weeks back, that we're going to go and stream English streams on Unveiling Faith. So I think that looks good. And I'll just welcome Amadin and Kelly. How you two doing? Before we jump into our review stream back again.
Yeah, we're good. Good. I think we're a bit earlier than usual on a day, but let's see what.
Yeah, I hope that gets us a couple of more views, or maybe a little higher number of live audience, right?
Yeah, and hopefully, this might be a difference to things. And most of the time we're streaming very late, at least according to Asian time, Eastern time, right? So maybe fatigue and stuff would be present in those circumstances. This time there isn't, I suspect. So we're more awake in some sense. Yeah.
Yeah. But then the catch is that we are now streaming, keeping the American or European audience in mind, right? So for them in US, probably it's just about morning time. Maybe in Florida it's probably around noon, and maybe in California it's about like 9 a.m., right? Maybe a few people might be able to catch the live stream. But yeah, let's not hope too much with this channel as of now. I'm pretty sure that this channel is gonna have, and since we posted the thumbnail quite late, so that's probably gonna impact how the live audience is right now. But hey, Kelly, how are you doing? I think you didn't get a chance to say anything. So
All well, man. How are you?
pretty good, pretty good. Yeah, I think you were not there. Were you there in last English stream? Yes, you were, right? So on this channel itself, right?
Yeah, I think I was.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's then add this. The review that we're gonna do. Okay, I'm gonna have to remove this because I haven't added it as of now. Let me open that link. Give me just 1 minute. I'll just set it up. I didn't set it up this time, but it shouldn't be too difficult to set it up. Okay, and I'll just add the screen. All right, guys, can you see it? So this is the Euthyphro's dilemma.
It's a pretty long video. I think. Do you want to skip explaining the Euthyphro dilemma, or maybe let's go through it. Okay.
Shall we? We'll maybe speed it up, right? To be quite honest, I haven't listened to it, so I'll be listening it for the first time, right? But I think we are all very familiar with Euthyphro's dilemma. I mean, there's hardly a single episode or a stream where it doesn't come up. So, but we'll still see what he has to say and what his version is, right? I'm pretty sure there's not going to be much of a difference, but let's not assume things.
In the West and in America, especially, everyone is required to take philosophy.
Hey, Martin, we're getting a serious feedback from your side. Yeah. All right. Okay. Thanks, Martin.
101 course. And one of the first topics, and one of the most well-known topics that is discussed in these Philosophy 101 courses, and amongst academics and even Muslims and non-Muslims, is that of Euthyphro's dilemma. And many students, when hearing this dilemma, do kind of leave the class a little bit stumped. How do we resolve this dilemma? Dilemma for many students poses a threat to their own beliefs in God. And in this video, I want to talk to you guys about this dilemma, and more specifically, I want to give you guys the Islamic solution to this dilemma. I believe this Islamic solution I'm going to present to you guys is not really found anywhere else. I have looked on the internet. The solution to this Euthyphro's dilemma, and the solution that I'm going to be providing to you guys today in this video, is entirely unique, yet it is found within the Islamic corpus. I believe the solution to this issue is through the Asma wa Sifat, the names and attributes of Allah. We delve deep into the Asma wa Sifat, the names and attributes of Allah within the Islamic corpus, that we will be able to solve the Euthyphro's dilemma. I'll start this video off by first describing what the dilemma is, the problems that it poses to theists, what are the divine names and attributes of Allah within the Islamic context, and how this understanding of God's names and attributes help us solve Euthyphro's dilemma. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let's begin. For starters, what is Euthyphro's dilemma? Well, Euthyphro's dilemma is founded in the works of Plato, in his book Euthyphro, actually. And in this book, the character of Euthyphro is going to put his dad in jail. He's going to go against his dad for murdering somebody. Socrates is shocked by this. Why would Euthyphro go against his own father? Because back in those days, bloodlines, family were much more important than, say, any moral conduct or law. In this context, Socrates asks Euthyphro, what does it mean to be pious? What is piety? Now, Euthyphro gives a bunch of answers to this question, and Socrates, as usual, is not happy with the answers he provides. One of the answers that Euthyphro gives to Socrates is that Euthyphro states that what is pious is what is loved by the gods. So whatever the gods, because they were obviously the Greeks were polytheists, whatever the gods demand as pious, that thing is pious. Upon hearing this, Socrates gives the famous line that brought up Euthyphro's dilemma, a dilemma that is still discussed within the field of philosophy of religion. What Socrates states, is the pious being loved by the gods because it is pious? Or is it pious because it is being loved by the gods? In simpler terms, is something pious because the gods simply deem it to be pious? Or is something pious because that thing in it of itself is pious, has piety within it? However, nowadays, you don't hear this specific formulation of this dilemma. You hear a different iteration of it. The great polymath and philosopher Leibniz, he formulates the modern iteration of this dilemma, the one that many times people on the internet use, academics use, and atheist YouTubers use to go against theists. Leibniz states, is it good and just because God wills it, or whether God wills it because it is good and just? Essentially, do conceptions of good and evil come solely from God, or do these conceptions of good and evil come from an outside source other than God? For instance, let's take the example of giving charity to the poor, giving money to the poor, helping the poor out. Some people might take a divine command theorist approach, which means that they will say that giving money to the poor is good because God deems it as good, i.e. there's nothing in it of itself that is good within the act of giving to the poor. Some other people might say, no, giving to the poor is good in and of itself, and that is why God deemed it for it to be good. That's why he commands us to do that, because giving money to the poor is in and of itself good. What is the problem in this dilemma? What does this place the theist into? Well, the theist is placed into a very hard corner, and he's stuck accepting two solutions to this dilemma that are not really satisfactory. If one were to state that what is good comes from God, then what is good is arbitrary. Think about it. If God just randomly deems what is good and what is evil, then anything could realistically be good or evil. There could have been a world in which God just flipped everything around and made stealing good and making the poor evil. What is good or evil is then arbitrary. And this leads to a lot of issues because our own conceptions of morality are then just arbitrary. We're only moral if we believe that there is a God, and we're only moral if we follow that exact God. Morality is not instinctive within us. It's just arbitrarily what God set for us. On the other hand, if somebody were to not take this approach and say that, what is good because in and of itself is good, then there's an outside force that is determining what is good or what is wrong. That means morality or the law or what is good is outside of God. So God would then be dictated by that outside force, by that outside idea to dictate to us what is good. And this falls with the problem of God being the most powerful, the all-knowing. How can a God who is the all-powerful, all-knowing, then be dictated by an outside force to tell us what is good or what is evil? We're in this corner as theists, in this dilemma. Do we say that the commands of God are arbitrary and that they're just specifically, and they're just random? God created us and he just set up the rules as he wanted it to be? Or do we say that those things that we see as good are good in and of themselves, which we can protect our morality, our instinctive nature, yet we give up the power and the all-knowingness that God has? So which one should the theist take? And this is the main problem that is thrown at theists from the Euthyphro's dilemma. How do we get out of the situation of either A, saying that God's actions are arbitrary, what is good and what is wrong is simply arbitrary from God, or B, declaring that there's an outside force outside of God to determine what is good and what is wrong for God to command to us? Both of these horns are not the one that we want to sit on. These are problematic horns, and we don't want to be biting the bullet for either one of these. So how do we come out of this problem? In order to come out of this dilemma, we need a solution that does not fall into either one of these horns. That the solution does not indicate that God's actions and what he demands of good or evil are arbitrary, and that this solution does not make us as an outside force dictating to God what is good and what is wrong to command to us. And I believe that the Islamic Islamic conceptions of God's names and attributes, the asma wa sifat of Allah, is the solution that is needed for this dilemma. However, prior to seeing how this conception of God's names and attributes can solve this dilemma, we first need to quickly understand the names and attributes of Allah within the Islamic context, the Islamic corpus. In Islam, Allah has 99 names that we know of. He has more names. However, what is given to us through the Quran, through the Sunnah, the Prophet Muhammad, i.e. the sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad, are 99 names. Some of these names are Ar-Rahman, the most merciful, Al-Ghafur, the most forgiving, Al-Jabbar, the compeller and the amender, and there are many other names as well. All of these names link to an attribute. So for instance, we have Ar-Rahman, the most merciful. His name is not just random. God has the name of Ar-Rahman, the most merciful, because he is the most merciful, meaning that God has the attribute of being super and the most merciful. He has the attribute of mercy. He has the name of Al-Ghafur, the most forgiving, because he has the attribute of forgiveness as well. Now, in the Islamic context, Allah, God, the necessary being, the first cause, whatever phraseology you want to use for a monotheistic God, God necessarily has these names and attributes, meaning that if we were to argue, if somebody were to come to us, and somebody were to argue to us that, hey, I believe in God, but then they reject one of these names and attributes, then that is not the Islamic conception of Allah. Because Allah has these 99 names. And the best way to think about it is that a triangle is necessarily three-sided. If somebody were to say, I saw a triangle outside on the street, and then he says, yeah, but it was a four-sided triangle, then he's not really seeing a triangle, he's seeing a square. Same thing goes for the divine names and attributes of Allah. God is these names and attributes. These names and attributes are what is God. So God is Al-Ghafur, he's Al-Rahman, he's Al-Jabbar, he's Al-Bar, the source of all good. This is what God essentially is. In the Islamic understanding of Allah's names and attributes, there are a couple of principles that need to be understood of God's names and attributes. Now, what is relevant to us in this discussion are only three, and these can be found in Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen's book, Qawaid al-Muthla. One of the first principles that Ibn Uthaymeen gives is that all God's names and attributes are perfect. And by perfect, he means there's no deficiency in them. So let's take the example of Ar-Rahman, the most merciful. God has no deficiency in his mercy. There's no instance when God gives his mercy to a wrong person or does not give his mercy to somebody that merits Allah's mercy. We can also see Al-Ghafur, the most forgiving. God is perfect in his ability to forgive people. If somebody comes to God for forgiveness, then God will forgive them if they have the right intention, they're properly going to God for forgiveness. But God will not forgive somebody who, for instance, goes against God, who hates God and does not ask for God's forgiveness. God places his mercy in the perfect quadrants. God is perfectly merciful. God is perfectly the most forgiving, or perfectly Al-Jabbar, the compeller and the amender. So none of God's names and attributes are deficient. The second rule that is important to understand that all of God's names and attributes are actually good. In fact, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, هُوَ الْخَالِقُ الْبَارِئُ وَالْمُصَوِّرُ لَهُ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى. He is Allah, the planner, executor, and fashioner of his creation. His are the names the most beautiful. And by beautiful here, it means good. Husna, it means beautiful and can also mean good. So all of God's names and attributes are beautiful, are good. And obviously when we hear something like Ar-Rahman, the most merciful, we understand this conception better. God is the most merciful, and obviously that is a good idea because we see it as good. However, there are also other names of Allah that on the outside are not good, but because all of God's names and attributes are good, they fall in line that even those names and attributes are good as well. For instance, in the ayah, Huwa al-Khaliq, Allah is the creator. Being a creator does not necessarily mean it's good. I mean, look at Oppenheimer. However, Allah is a good creator because all of his names and attributes are good. Allah is also Al-Malik, the sovereign. And now the name sovereign for some people has a bad context, and rather it simply has a neutral context. But in the aspect of God's names and attributes, through the Islamic understanding, that name is good as well. It falls in line with the other names of Allah that are all good and beautiful. And lastly, all the names and attributes of Allah can be found in the Quran and Sunnah, i.e., we Muslims didn't just come up randomly with these names. It wasn't like, oh, there were some problems in philosophy of religion, the problem of evil, and so on, so we're just going to make up some of these names so we can get away from these problems. No. All of these names and attributes can be found in the Quran and the Hadith, the sayings.
Okay, it has run for much longer than I would have liked it to. But anyways, so quite a few issues already. I don't know if you guys would agree with me on this. At least I know that we have discussed this in quite a few streams, that all the 99 names that he's talking about and those attributes that they correspond to, I think there is a serious problem. They are all incompatible with each other. And very famous example that Khali and I and Madin bring up is this, the most merciful, that is Rahman, and then the just, the most just, or the Al-Adl, the doer of Adl, right? So this is, they say that this implies perfect mercy and perfect justice, but then they can't be, you can't have a perfect justice with perfect mercy. And I think we have spoken about it at least 100 times in our various streams, right? I mean, if you want to do justice, that means you have to mete out a punishment that is corresponding to whatever bad you have done, or whatever crimes you have done, or whatever you can call it, whatever you have done against God or anybody else, right? So that's justice. But for mercy, to get mercy, you have to get something lesser than what you deserve. So you can't be most merciful, but at the same time, you can't be most just, right? And there is a another attribute or another name for God, and especially in Islamic paradigm, it's the all-powerful, right? And there is Al-Qadir, right? But then there is another problem. If he's Al-Qadir and he's most merciful, then these two don't match with each other as well. You look at the whole world, just our Earth, and there is plenty of suffering. Nobody would deny that there is no suffering. So then the most merciful, just think about the animal suffering, remove human suffering if there is any theodicy to be had. Just think about animal suffering, and there doesn't seem to be any mercy over there, because there is no theodicy to at least mete out some kind of cosmic justice towards the end. So I think there are quite a few problems here. One more problem that I'll point to is the definition of perfect here. I'm not quite sure what definition of perfect he's looking at, right? At least it baffles me. He's saying all these attributes, all these names imply that Allah is perfect. In what sense? What does it mean to be perfect? All these attributes are maxed out. If that's the case, then whatever problems I have pointed out, they max out as well. So yeah, I think these are the initial thoughts that I have. Madan, Kelly, I don't know, would you like me to carry on further listening to it, or do you have any thoughts on it?
So I think the first thing I want to say regarding the Euthyphro dilemma in relation to it, I know you mentioned a few things about attributes and so on, but I think that's a somewhat tangential issue, right? Somewhat, but it's not a tangential exactly, but it's a related issue indeed. But I think I really want to address his point that this is solving the Euthyphro dilemma, right? But so the first thing that he says coming into it is that he's not seen this before anywhere written, right? So it's almost suggesting that this is a very novel defense of divine command theory, right? That this is something somewhat novel. This is not at all true. It couldn't be less false. It couldn't be more false. Sorry, right? This is a very popular defense of divine command theories, modified divine command theory, and people all the way from William Lane Craig, William Alston, even Hamza Tzortzis, and people like Mohammed Hijab peddle today, right? And it's been within the classical discourse of Islamic arguments from divine morality from the beginnings of the Islamic inception throughout the 12th, 13th century as well, right? So this is not at all something unheard of. Yeah, it falls within a modern philosophical category that we call within the philosophy of religion of divine command theory, modified divine command theory, is which we bake the concepts of goodness and certain properties within the concept of in the nature of God, intrinsic to God, and by doing such, we create the impression that we are bypassing the sharp horns of the dilemma, right? That there is a third option. It's not a dichotomy. It's not either that it's independent to God or it's arbitrary. There is a third option, which is that God is synonymous to those qualities, and therefore he cannot command anything arbitrarily, but always it is aligned with his nature, and his nature is baked in mercifulness or benevolence and so on. This is very, very popular. It's actually the most modern defense of divine command theory. That's not been improved upon. There's no other updated version of it, right?
Totally. I think this solution was proposed by some what's his name? I think in 1950s or something. I think
Mm.
this solution was proposed, and then I think later on maybe J.L. Schellenberg or somebody else said no, this solution doesn't work. Maybe some
Jeremy
other
Coons.
philosopher, yeah?
Jeremy Coons. Jeremy
Jeremy
Coons.
Coons, right?
Yeah. I mean, his
No,
his
but
work.
Jeremy Coons is a theist, right?
I think you're thinking about Robert Coons.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. I've sent Jeremy Coons' paper live on this channel before, and his paper hasn't really been um, argued against effectively at all.
Yeah. There is no third option. I think what he's trying to do is saying
Yes.
this is the middle option, but there are only two horns. No matter what, and we have spoken about this, that no matter how you say it, it pushes the problem one step further back, right?
Mhm.
And that's exactly what it is. I was just trying to point out that these whatever all these attributes here he's talking about, of course there are some issues within those attributes, right?
By the
And
way,
there, of course, yeah.
can you look at the chat? Add Kylie.
Oh, Kelly is okay. Kelly, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. How long have you been on the backstage?
I've been out for a while now.
Oh, I just didn't
I
realize
was
you
waiting
were
for you
out.
to add me.
You
Okay,
didn't
no
even
problem.
say anything on the private chat. Oh,
You
you
did.
I
did.
did. I did.
That's how
Okay,
I told you.
okay.
I did.
Yeah.
Okay, I just didn't realize.
Okay, no
Just
problem.
didn't
No problem. Okay.
Yeah. And I kept asking, hey, Kylie, where's your take? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Go ahead, Kylie. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, if Mahadan has already said what he wanted to say, I believe he wanted to say a bit more. But I think I will just quickly
I'll say it.
say.
I'll
I'll
say it
just
later after
quickly
you.
say a lot of things, a lot of problems that I have with what he said. First of all, I mean, he thinks that this is something exclusive to Islam. I don't know why does he think that these attributes or names are something. I mean, I don't know the names, but maybe the attribute itself, it is not a concept unique to Islam. Christians have believed that there is a lot of attributes mentioned within the Bible, for God. So I don't know why does he think, and he continues to reiterate this point in his other videos as well. He believes that this concept of attributes and name of God is something unique to Islam. I don't know why he believes that. I think every religion has their concept of God and they
Yes.
have
Yes.
their attributes of God. So I don't know why does he keep saying
So
that.
William Lane Craig defends the Christian conception. Excuse me, Christian conception of God in exactly the same way.
Exactly.
Exactly the
Exactly.
same way. Right?
Exactly.
Exactly. And
Against Euthyphro. He says there is a third option. It's not arbitrary. It's not merely arbitrary or independent to God. It's central to the nature of God. God's character is such that it's good, and therefore it only commands good commands. It's not outside of God. It's in the nature of God. And what's in the nature of God? His characteristics. He's a good being. There you
Yeah.
go.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think
And that is the other
I'll digress for a bit. I'll
yeah.
digress for a bit and just put take 30 seconds to put a point. I've seen that a lot of these guys, the Dawagandists, all right, what they do is they come up with these things and say, hey, we found the solution to these problems first, right? We found the solution to algebraic equations. Found the solution to stars and everything, right? While there were all these Greek studies out there, and everybody
Yeah.
was
Like in
so
the in Christianity, God is conveyed to be this loving character, generous character. This beautiful, glorious. God and love is synonymously used interchangeably. So they've got enough literature on their side as well to come out with these divine attributes as well, which they do, and they have the same problems as well with contradictions and issues that you could raise. But the point is, there's enough meat in the Christian scriptures just for the same sort of argument, and that's exactly what they do. They did it before Muslims have done. This sort of defense against Euthyphro existed as long as Euthyphro existed.
exactly.
Exactly.
Kelly, I interrupted you. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this is one of the initial issues, and I think again I'll say that for some reason they also say something similar for the problem of evil. I mean, whenever it is raised, they'll often say, I mean, I've heard this from so many Muslims that, oh, this is a problem for Christians, not for Muslims. And when you look at their answer, it's exactly the same: the divine, the mysterious wisdom of God. So I don't know why do they keep coming up with, why do they believe that their answer is somehow unique? It's almost exactly the same in most cases. So that is the first point that I wanted to raise. The second one is, I mean, he keeps on emphasizing the Islamic conception of God. He says this is how God is defined. This is at least, and he said that if God is not, God has not these specific attributes, then this is not the Islamic conception of God. Okay, I don't know why. How would that help him to resolve this issue? But somehow he wants to emphasize that, and then he goes on to say that according to their Islamic conception, God's names and attributes are perfect. There is and meaning, he has defined it in a very tautological manner. Okay, meaning perfection means no deficiency. Well, what do you mean by no deficiency? What is a deficiency? You have to explain what is perfection, and not in terms of no deficiency, because you have to explain what is a deficiency then, and don't say deficiency means perfection. No deficiency means perfection. So instead of going around in circle, you have to explain, when you say God names are perfect, what do you mean by that? Number one, what do you mean by that? And number two, how do you know that his names are perfect? Don't tell me that this is because these
He
names are
says,
mentioned in the Quran,
yes.
not because God himself has said that he's perfect, because this doesn't help.
Yeah.
Why why do you think that because God said these are perfect, therefore these are perfect? Doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense. Even
I
if he
think that
exists.
that gets you into another horn, basically
Yeah.
arbitrary
Exactly.
horn.
This is again then you have selected a horn which is perfect, is whatever God says is
Arbitrary,
perfect,
yeah,
and
arbitrary
which makes
horn.
it arbitrary. And I think I just want to mention another thing. By arbitrary, I have seen a lot of people getting confused by understanding the word arbitrary with changing. They think that okay, something is arbitrary, then it could change. Even that is not necessary. It does, even if it's arbitrary, does not necessitate change, but a potential, a possibility of it being any other way, and not essentially being not having any issues with it. So let's say God has commanded Muslims to, or humans to be charitable to others. Now, arbitrary does not mean that he has to necessarily be, change this command. That does not come necessarily from the concept of arbitrary. Arbitrary means this command itself is arbitrary. There is no reason behind it. There is no logic. There is no
It could have been
grounding for this to be
something
good.
else as
It
well,
could have been.
right?
It could possibly have
Thinking.
been other way. It doesn't necessarily has to be any other way. In
Can
some
I
of the
just
cases. But
intervene? Can I just interrupt? I think
sorry.
in this context, arbitrary can differ from context to context of what we mean by it. In the
Yeah.
context
Okay.
of
In this.
Euthyphro discussions, it specific to morality is trying to say that it has no objective anchor, you may say. But I think
Exactly.
even
Yeah. No
better,
grounding. Yeah.
yeah,
No
even
grounding. No. No.
yeah,
Hmm.
an even better, simpler example would be just whims and desires.
Exactly.
Right?
Whims and desires.
Whims
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
desires.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It doesn't
So, so,
necessarily mean
so
the whims and desires can change. Yeah, it could be that
yeah,
it could be that there's a being that's whims and desires are frozen and never
yeah,
changing, but it'll
never
still
changing.
be arbitrary because it's from his whims and desires, not
Exactly.
not some sort of real kind of reason standard or objective standard or something like that. Yeah,
Exactly. So for example, you could like strawberry chocolate as opposed to mango. Sorry, strawberry ice cream as opposed to mango ice cream or any chocolate ice cream. Now, for it to be arbitrary, I would say it is arbitrary that you like strawberry ice cream. But for it to be arbitrary doesn't mean that okay, you need to now then also be able to change it to now later on I'll start liking chocolate ice cream. No, it doesn't necessitate. It doesn't necessarily follow from it. It does it. What it simply means is you like strawberry ice cream, okay, but it isn't necessary. This is not
yeah,
a necessary
that's
thing.
right.
It could have been any other way. So
Yeah,
this is something that I needed to
yeah,
point out, because this is, people misunderstand this point, this concept, and then they try to answer it that way.
yeah.
Now, this
And
is one
the other
point.
thing is this arbitrariness. The arbitrariness renders it subjective morality, and that's the whole point. So
Yes, yes, exactly.
the objectivist, the moral objectivist here, who's trying to prove moral objectivity through divine command theory, is arguing for objective morality. But by if they do accept the arbitrary horn, then they're saying that it's whims and desires, not yeah, and therefore whims and desires is just similar
Give
to
me,
the subjectivist who
give
believes.
me, give
So
me a
for,
minute.
yeah, go on. Okay, no, yeah. So
Okay, Kelly. Okay, Kelly is coming back. So, Madin, for this one, just a thought. When we talk about this as objective, I think the necessary, it necessarily follows then that any mind or any freely acting agent or deciding or acting agent can't command anything that could be objective, right? So
yeah,
any objective morality has to come from something outside of a mind,
that's right.
and that would necessarily follow, I think. I mean,
Um,
this is what it is, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean,
right?
kind of. So the whole point is, it's not merely the fact that it's coming from a mind. The objection, the objection is that it's coming from his whims and desires, right?
Yeah, but then,
So
yeah, I mean, unless
type
until a
of mind
mind is such
simple.
that, yeah,
Yeah, it's whims and desires. It's got no. So somebody can project from their mind that, let's say, 2 + 2 = 4. Here's 2 apples. Here's 2 apples.
yeah, yeah.
If you,
So
yeah,
in
I wouldn't say that.
straight,
Yeah, there's something more to it than being arbitrary
yeah,
and
yeah,
whimsical.
no, in a straightforward answer, then it becomes an automaton. That mind is an automaton,
Mm.
right? It cannot have its whims and desires just to dictate anything, right? Which is
Yeah,
moral, which is objectively
that's right.
moral, right?
If God,
Right.
if God, for example, decided what the meaning of these terms are, like benevolence and arbitrarily through its whims and desires, it'll be subjective, right? This is closely related to the stronger argument that anything that comes from a mind, preferring one thing to another, is subjective. But you
It's
don't need to
subjective,
go
yeah.
down that lane necessarily in order to. It doesn't imply that necessarily. You can make that's a separate objection you can make. That isn't it the case that, wait a minute, if there is a mind saying it, then we still have the issue of subjective morality, because it's not mind independently true, right? Whereas some people might not think that. Well, let me put it this way. So yeah, that could be the objection, but some people might have a nuanced response to that, which is that things don't need to be necessarily, in order for it to be mind independently true, not grasped in the mind. Let's not confuse mind independently true without it being logically grasped in one's mind or something, right? Because in the end, anything that is going to be mind independently true, for it to be objectively true, has to be grasped by a mind, right? We think, for example, compared to our feelings or passions and desires, the tree that exists 3 kilometers away is mind independently true. The sun is mind independently true. That's how we contrast morality, right? Whereas these things can be learned by science. Like, I can learn that the tree exists. How do you prove that I should not kill my siblings? That statement seems to be part of my emotions, right? It's not something out there in the world, right? So in order for it to be mind independently true, I have to go and explore something out there in the world. So some people would therefore say anything that's stuck in the mind and there's no further correspondence is not mind independently true. And if it's not mind independently true, it's just subjective. Whereas
It's
other people,
subjective, right?
yeah, some people may say that is right. They'll accept that sort of sketch, but they'll say that they may argue, for example, that ultimately even the tree that you have to you have to grasp it with your mind. It's mind independently true in the sense that there is some sort of external correspondence, but
Yeah, I think I'm in the second camp who says that mind independently, the tree can't be a mind independently true. I think there is a huge
yeah,
gap from getting that to getting to that conclusion, right?
we've talked about this we've talked about the
Yeah, yeah,
nuance.
we have gone on
I don't think you
very
are in that
lengthy
camp, because
discussion on
if
this.
you were
Yeah,
in that camp, you would actually be an idealist or some
yeah,
sort
yeah,
of external world
yeah.
skeptic, and I don't think you necessarily are, right? I
No,
think
no. So yeah, I think I
let's
think I keep getting in and out of it
yeah
basically.
let's not get boggled down to it, though. I don't want to get
Yeah,
into
yeah,
that discussion, but
yeah.
yeah, but the point
Shall
is
we move on?
yeah,
Yeah.
very quickly though, very quickly, the point of some things being still objectively true whilst being mediated by the mind is that you can discover, for example, the a triangle can't be a square, right? And that's still just like the tree, both like the tree, grasping the correspondence with the tree, and the recognition that the square can't be a triangle are both grasped by the mind, but they're both mind independently true in the sense that um, um, it's not based on your mere whims and desires, right? It's not based on your preferences. There's something about the concept of a triangle which is logically impossible to be a right, and it's a logically impossible truth, and therefore a necessary truth, and therefore even minds, even if we didn't exist, it's because we have minds, we can understand it. But even if we didn't understand it, it will still be true in some sense, just to be discovered had there been a mind. Like a square cannot be a triangle, just like the tree can exist mind independently. We just needed our sensory apparatus to come and pick up the sense data to understand that the tree existed there. So yeah, it's not merely the case that something being in a mind, therefore it will become subjective. Because if you do not go down the route that everything that you access through the mind is anything that you get grasped through a mind, it must be subjective. Then you don't have any objective ontology, because everything is part of your subjective epistemology. All knowledge is just mediated through the mind. And if that's the case, then you do end up in problems of either solipsism or idealism, which is that there isn't any mind-independent reality, or you might be in the middle, which is kind of where I am, right? Which is you might be an external world skeptic in some sense, that we can't know these things. We can't know these things without ever jumping out of our minds. And if we do jump out of our minds, what apparatus would we be using to? Would that not be another mind? So it might be even logically impossible to confirm a mind-independent reality, because it requires a mental medium, right?
Mental state to comprehend that. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
and that's what
okay. Let's
as well. But go on.
All right, let's move. Yeah, let's move on. Kelly, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay.
Of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. With this understanding of God's names and attributes, we can finally go to the section of dealing with Euthyphro's dilemma. Once again, in order for us to find a solution to this dilemma, we need to give a solution that, one, does not make God's action, does not make what God deems as good arbitrary, and two, does not mean that there is an outside force determining for God what is good and what is wrong. And I believe the Islamic conception of God's names and attributes, as we just went over, can give us this solution. And give us a solution that does not have any of these two horns of this dilemma. Now let us tackle both of these horns individually. Let us start off with the first horn of this dilemma, that if we say that that goodness comes from God, then God's commands are arbitrary. However, with the understanding of God's names and attributes, we see that is not the case. While commands of good and evil do come from God, that does not make it arbitrary. Let's think about it this way. Let's look at the name of God, Ar-Rahman, the most merciful. We humans, we understand that mercy is good. When somebody makes a mistake, we sometimes want to show them mercy. When a child makes a mistake, or when your wife or your husband or your father or your mother or your kids make a mistake, and based on who they are, we want to show them mercy. Just being this harsh critic and this judge and laying down the law sometimes is not good. And I think the majority of us can instinctively feel that. Well, God is the most merciful. God is the most merciful before anyone or anything existed for him to show his mercy. He was necessarily the most merciful. So whatever God commands in just this one name of God links back to his mercy. In fact, in Hadith of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam states, "Man la yarham la yurham." Whoever does not show mercy will not be given mercy. And there's another hadith from Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that states, "Man la yarham nas." Whoever does not show mercy to the people, Allah will not show mercy to that person. Now, is Allah just randomly, arbitrarily telling people to be merciful? That there's something wrong if you're not merciful? Well, no, because Allah is the most merciful. Another name of Allah is Al-Ghafur, the most forgiving. This understanding of forgiving people is good, and God is the most forgiving. It's not arbitrary.
Would just like to score a cheap point over here. Madhan, there's a feedback from your side. So this is a very cheap point that I'm going to score some points on. Maybe I won't be able to score any points here. But he brought in the point that that hadith, he said, right? He who does not show mercy will not get mercy, right? Now, did Prophet Muhammad show mercy on the Banu Qurayza tribe? Did he or did he not? I don't know. Some say he did not need to show mercy because he was being just. And that's exactly the problem I think I highlighted earlier, that if you are being perfect, right? I think KP dropped off again, right? So if you do that, then you won't be able to show, if you are just, then you won't be able to do merciful acts, and if you are merciful, then you won't be able to do just acts. So just wanted to highlight that point. Okay, let's move on now.
Whatever God commands links back to his divine names and attributes. Going back to one of the examples I gave in the beginning of this video, and giving money to the poor. This is a command of God, that all monotheistic religions actually have this command to give money to the poor, to help the fuqara, the poor people. Is this arbitrary? Well, not really, because God is Ar-Razzaq. He is the most giving, the total provider. Allah loves providing for people. Because all of God's names and attributes are perfect and they are good, then Allah will push for us to fulfill, to connect to the names and attributes of Allah. So there's giving money to the poor, connect to Allah being Ar-Razzaq, the provider, and it links to that attribute of God providing for.
I think we get his point, and it's just obviously absurd one, right? He just doesn't get it like most of the theists, right? So the whole point of divine command theory is to demonstrate that divine command theory is the only way you can have objective moral ethics, right? That is the source of ethics, the locus point of ethics, the central legislator of ethics, right? The idea of divine command theory itself is to say that God lays down the law, right? And in order to avoid the arbitrary horn, they seat it into the nature of God, and this is called modified divine command theory. So it just avoids the problem of the idea that God can whimsically command anything, and that would be moral, because that will be a very bankrupt notion of moral, simply because it will become subjective. And if it's subjective, where you're just coming from your whims or preferences, you define justice in the way you want, you define compassion in the way you want, you define what's right and wrong in the way you want. You know, rape could have been rendered good, and murder could be rendered good, and charity could be rendered evil, because God just writes it into the law, right? In order to avoid that, you kind of say, no, there is these hard constraints on God by his nature. And what are those constraints? It's his character. And what is in his character is these qualities that he has, these names, attributes. You know, he's benevolent. Let's say one of them merciful, whatever, right? But the problem with that is that, as we've said in many occasions, and we've said even in the beginning, I'll just flesh it out, it really does render the same question back on its head again, right?
Why have this quality rather than some other quality? Basically, why have this attribute rather than some other attribute? I think we have beaten this argument to death pretty much. Right?
Yes. But let me just point out, this is a different audience, isn't it? Whoever's going to be
no. I'm just saying to the audience, right? I think not to you.
So Jeremy Coons in his recent video, if anybody wants to look at it. So according to this person over here on the video, this doesn't exist. He's never seen any other theist make this brilliant masterpiece of an argument, right? This excellent novel argument for modified divine command theory. This is just news to me. So I don't know what Jeremy Coons has been doing then for the last 10 years, 15 years maybe, I think, talking about attacking exactly this point, attacking modified divine command theory. Again, baking goodness into God and what the problems are. So anybody wants to look at it, if Petrit Kola is watching this, if I pronounce his name properly, you do your research, man. If you've Googled this and you didn't find anything, then I'm pretty surprised, because it's right there at the beginning. Nowadays we have AI, and AI will find it for you. You don't even need to do any of the research.
No. If Petrit Kola is watching it, then I'll request him to jump on the stream. We'll make the link public, and then maybe we can have a nice, cordial conversation. I think we have had an exchange thread with him long time back, probably a year and a half back or so, on some other topic, right? So, and that was probably not a heated exchange. So if he is listening, probably he would want to go in and explain to us why he thinks this solves it. We think it does not, and we have, it's not just us saying that. That's been in the philosophical literature for a long time, that the modified divine command theory doesn't solve it.
So very quickly, to summarize Kuhn's main sort of essence of a point, I can't do all of justice to it because it's like 10 pages, 15 pages long. But some of the things that stand out to me is the idea of is God good because of does God make the concept of his attributes good, or does his attributes make him good? And of course, it's the latter, not the former, right? If God possessed any other set of attributes, right? If God possessed, for example, tyranny and malice and hatred, that would be an evil God. And that is what Petrit Kola is pretty much suggesting. He's saying here that we understand that mercifulness is good. Yeah, we understand that's good. And this is why when we read the Quran, it says over here God is merciful, we realize and recognize that God has a good quality of mercy. And mercy, because God possesses that quality of mercy, or justice or whatever you want to call it. It might be vague, but we kind of intuitively have an understanding that what it might mean, right? Or it says compassion, and compassion clearly is a good thing. Or charitable, that charitable is a good thing. He cares about other people. Altruistic good. Yeah, is because these concepts is what makes things good, right? It's not that God makes them good, right? Because if God made those qualities good, then anything had God possessed would turn good itself. It could be any a random assembly of qualities. If God possessed the quality of tyranny, abject hatred and tyranny and cruelty, then it will be also good. Then good becomes just that which God possesses. Good is an empty term just to say, it's a redundant term. It's a meaningless term. It just says what is God. Whatever is identical to God is good, right? Again, we fall foul to the problem of the arbitrary horn, right? In order to avoid the arbitrary horn, you have to have a solid understanding of these mercifulness and think those are good. And if those are good qualities, then if God did not have those qualities, he won't be good. Because he has those qualities, that is good. And therefore, it's because of those things God is good. But if it's because of those things that God is good, then it's those qualities themselves, those virtues, right, that are good, right? And this is where it goes back to the independent horn, right? Because if it's those qualities that make something good, then the reason why charity is good is because a charitable God recognizes that charity is good because charity is good. Can you see what I'm saying? So the action of charity is good in and of itself because we understand that charity is good because charitableness is good, right? And similarly, benevolence is good because we understand that benevolence is good, right? Because being kind to people, being charitable to people, being altruistic, helping people, and stuff like that, taking the interest of others as your own maybe, is a good thing, right? If God didn't have that quality, he wouldn't be good. Because God has that quality, he is good. But because we understand that that is a good thing, benevolence is a good thing, then anybody who had that quality would be good, right? It doesn't have to be etched in the character of God, right? Because imagine if Philo, right? Philo was very benevolent, right? Philo was very charitable. Yeah, it's an attribute in Philo. No?
I'm not gonna be charitable now on this. One more minute now, then.
Yeah. So can you see what I'm saying? So Philo would be good, and whatever he says, if Philo was 99% of the time charitable, then his actions and decisions and stuff like that would generally flow from his character as good. What is the standard here? Is it just God? No, it's those characteristics that makes something good. Yeah. So in some sense,
shall we jump on to the next one now?
Final 30 seconds. In some sense, what Muslims have done they've kind of made these characteristics synonymous to God. And what Euthyphro is trying to show is that in a world where God doesn't exist, those characteristics can still exist because they do. We understand it, and we can still have a foundation for morality if that is the foundation ultimately. If you avoid the arbitrary horn, then that will become the foundation. The foundation will become these concepts. Yeah, sorry. Hello.
Kelly, you want to add something to it? Kelly, can you hear me? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. We can't hear you, Kelly. I think if you're saying you are unmuted, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. No. I said I think already has been covered. Everything has been covered already. So I think, in fact, this was his main point in the video as well. So I don't even think we need to go ahead with this.
Yeah. I think we'll move on to the next one.
Who created?
I think this one may not be as palatable, but let's see. I don't know. Or shall we add the consciousness one?
who created God? This is one of the biggest questions posed by atheists. And the answer is very simple. God, by definition, has no beginning. The same way you wouldn't ask the question, why are all triangles three-sided? Because the definition of a triangle is that it is three-sided. Hence, this question makes no sense. But what are the other two possibilities that atheists can provide to explain our existence? Well, the two possibilities are found in the Quran. Am khuliqu min ghayri shay'in, where you created out of nothing. Well, nothingness cannot beget somethingness, hence we'll just push it off to the side. Am hum khaliqun, where you, the creators of yourselves. Many atheists claim that we just always existed here, the multiverse, the infinite sets. But the question is, if you're positing an infinite sets, doesn't that still need an explanation? Doesn't that still need an explanation outside of itself? More so, isn't it more complicated than just positing a one necessary being, a first cause to the universe? The real answer to this is that atheists who uphold infinity, uphold the multiverse, only do so in order to deny the existence of God. Because God not only explains all the variables, but also is a simpler answer than any other answer that atheists can give. Think about it.
Okay, so first of all, yeah, can you hear me? Philo, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can.
Okay,
Sure.
okay.
Go ahead.
So yeah, I think I'll just quickly try to deal with this. The first thing is, who created God? Is this like the biggest question atheists ask? I think any logical atheist would not ask this question on its own as a separate question, um, if they believe that as a definition. But it will be a response if someone argues simply like, who created everything and what is the uh, where did the universe come from and all of these questions. If you ask these questions, then an atheist might in response will ask you this question, okay, where did God come from? The response, and this is a valid counter question to such a question,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
because the argument that the theist should present is, why does the universe why is the universe something that needs a sort of cause behind it, but God uh, doesn't? So why? So they might say that God is the first cause, but then the one option that Petrit Kola already also missed in his video, because that is not mentioned in the Quran, which is, okay, why can't the universe be eternal, and why can't the universe always be there? And that is the question that needs to be answered or clarified by the theist. And they might have some, they do present some arguments for that. But if you will say that, okay, where did the universe come from, then the atheist will ask you, okay, where did God come from then? Because if you'll take that principle as to everything must have a cause, well, then you'll ask, where did God come from? But if you'll say, well, no, universe must have a cause, then he'll ask, okay, why must the universe have a cause? How do you know that the universe was something that must have a cause, but God ultimately, if God can be eternal, why can't the universe be eternal?
Mm.
So you
Why
will
can't
have to be very specific. Yeah,
a nonsensical question like why, what he said is, God is like a triangle must have three sides. God
yeah,
must be unstated. Why can't the universe be like that? Simple as that.
exactly,
Yeah.
simple as
It's a
that.
very simple answer. Yeah, I think
Simple,
why just can't universe be exactly the same? I think we have
exactly, and
posited this quite a few times. Just
and
it could be just an
interestingly,
automaton, right? And just created it. That's about it.
and
That
exactly.
automaton had been there for eternity.
Exactly. And interestingly, he said that, oh, there are only two options which have been covered in the Quran. Well, actually, this is the option which is not covered by Quran, because the verse that generally the theists refer to, the Muslims refer to, mentions these three possibilities. Well, were you created from nothing, or did you create yourself, or there was a third one, I don't know.
I think there are only two I remember, right?
There are
Or
three. There are three
there
options,
is a
I think.
three. Yeah, maybe there
I
is a
believe there
third
are
one as
three,
well.
but the eternal one is not discussed at all, which is, I think, I think it's the best one, and you need to address this.
Yeah.
And and that is not covered. So it in a way is a deficiency in the argument that is presented from Quran. So you have to. I mean, you should acknowledge that, but of course they'll not acknowledge. They'll say no. I don't know what they'll answer, but I know. But then he moved on to say that, God is the simplest explanation. It is not. It is not. Even if you consider, and all the, I mean, I don't know how the multiverse would be, or whatever cause behind if he has brought this point up in response to this question, who created God? I think it was a bit tangent, but just to address his point, God is not the simplest, or at least it is not simpler than the multiverse. Because God, if you will simply, there are conceptions of God. Now, let me be very clear. There are conceptions of God which are extremely simple, but you don't believe in that God. And actually, those conceptions of God are very close to atheism, I would say, because they're very close to atheistic or naturalistic or mechanistic causes. So if God is very simple, then simple conceptions of God, they're not these religious kinds of gods. The conceptions of God are not these close to religious conceptions of God. The religious conception of God, which is what Muslims have as well, is God is not just timeless, spaceless, and eternal, and omnipotent. He also has a will. He has wisdom. He's omniscient. So he knows everything, not just what is, but what could possibly be. And the moment you add these attributes, God is no longer simple than multiverse, because every possible thing that could be there, God knows about it. So you claiming that God is a simple conception, it is not. Your conception of God is not simple at all. If it is, I mean, at least it is equally complex as the multiverse, at least. And I think it is more because you have added all these wisdoms and intentions behind it and all of that. So no, you're wrong that God is a simpler explanation than the multiverse. At least your conception of God is not simpler than the multiverse.
Yeah, that's right. No, yeah. So yeah, I won't address the first part because about the creator. It's like this is like a very popular objection from. It's a response to a line of logic that theists raise, right? We don't just go around thinking who created God for no reason. I don't think there's anything wrong with the concept of an uncreated cause or a creator. I don't think there's anything logically impossible about a uncreated creator, right? That's fine. The point is a response to the design argument, right? Who thinks there has to be a designer, or a creator, and then somebody may say, okay, then who created God as a logical consequence of that, right? And then they kind of define God as such that they doesn't need to, and then the point becomes, if you can define God like that, then why can't you define, you know? Simple. I don't understand why Petrit Kola doesn't understand this. I mean, it's not rocket science to understand that now. But forget that though. I think Kylie addressed that part. I think with the question of simplicity. Before I go into the question of simplicity, I want to talk about the multiverse thing that he said that atheists conjure this up as just as a response to the only reason that they hold on to the multiverse is a response to theism. Absolutely
Yeah, I
not.
think that's a false accusation.
That's a false accusation entirely. Maybe some atheists do that, but he doesn't have a sociological or anthropological or any sort of empirical data supporting the notion that this is a majority atheist belief amongst popular atheists or academic atheists. He doesn't. He just said this. Some atheists may do this. We don't know the quantity. So this is again just a falsehood, or at least an unsupported, unsubstantiated kind of form of mockery that he's unleashed. But the thing is, even the physicist, I think he's a cosmologist actually, Luke Barnes, right? He's a Christian cosmologist. He's quite popular for defending the fine tuning argument. He doesn't think, for example, atheism is true. He thinks theism is true. He's debated Sean Carroll. He's debated Alex Malpass on the fine tuning argument. He's a very deep thinker, etc. He's I won't say he's an academic philosopher, but he's an educated PhD fellow, etc. And he himself says when he corrects Christians on this same accusation that the multiverse is a figment of the atheistic mind as a response to God, and he correct because he's a cosmologist and he knows this, that they actually know the history of cosmology shows that the multiverse is actually an outcome on many cosmological theories. That this is a prediction or a result of, or it indicates towards a multiverse. It had nothing to do with atheism, right? It's based on scientific data, right? Various different models of the in cosmology suggest that multiverse is a genuine theory. It's still speculative right now, but is a genuine theory that wasn't just created in theist versus atheist battles. And Luke Barnes doesn't have a reason to deceptively defend that idea because he's a Christian himself and he's very, very, very harsh on atheists. But he also himself in his books and publications and so on makes the argument that no, it's not true that this is just a weapon created by atheists. It's a genuine theory. It's a genuine actual possibility that has some minimal backing behind it, but growing focus behind it. Yeah. Before I continue my rest of the Philo, do you want to say something on this? So, yeah.
No. I think you two have said enough. Maybe we can move on to the next one. Or you want to add something to it?
Yeah. Can I just say something on the simplicity thing then? Because So he thinks it's a simpler theory, but let me just quickly clarify how simplicity kind of works. I mean, so there's different concepts of simplicity. It's like Occam's razor, right? You've got the quantitative interpretation, and then you've got the qualitative interpretation, right? The quantitative interpretation is that the more number of things you posit, the more unlikely the hypothesis or the theory, right? It's not parsimonious. It's not an economical. It's a superfluous set of requirements that you're adding to it, right? The quantitative theory of interpretation, of Occam's razor, though, it's not necessarily the most soundest. Bertrand Russell, for example, made a better distinction, where he favored the qualitative distinction, that Occam's razor should be interpreted qualitatively, not quantitatively. It's not merely the number of items that you present in a theory that makes it, like, the greater entities that you posit in the theory, the more unlikely it becomes. There's no necessary correlation, no necessary correlation between entities that you posit, whatever an entity means, and its reduction in likelihood of being true, right? If there's for example, let's say there's a heist, there's a crime scene. A crime scene unfolds, and a bank gets robbed, right? And the crime scene is very complex. There's a lot of things falling apart, a lot of signs of intelligent work, lots of doors that were broken in one go, right? In this scenario, it will be highly idiotic to posit one person did this, maybe, right? It'll be the theory that 15 people or 20 people, or this was a work of a team, is more likely, right? So would somebody then come around and say, well, I think the theory that one person did it is more likely than the theory that multiple people did it, because in the multiple people case, you're positing more entities, and Occam's razor says, posit only one entity. No, that's stupid. That's idiocy. In this situation, the more complex situation where there's more entities is the more likely situation. So there's no necessary correlation between likelihood of a theory being true and its simplicity. And we see this throughout science. For example, the 4 elements, the initial 4 elements that we thought not prehistoric, but in ancient times, what is it? Earth, wind, fire, water.
The 5 elements. The 5
the
elements,
5 elements,
right?
you want to call it 4 or 5 elements, whatever it is. There's another one, isn't there? Is it land or something? It's oversimplification. It's an oversimplification. Then came the periodic table, which made things more complex. Now we have many more elements, right? Well, did we get rid of the periodic table because of Occam's razor? No, we didn't. Whatever true was true. The periodic table is far more complex than the simpler theory of the elements that we had in ancient times, right? And entirety of science is like this. In fact, science finds that things are more and more and more and more complex, right? So the quantitative interpretation of Occam's razor, that this guy is holding on to, Petrit Kola, is completely outdated and wrong. Nobody really holds on to that. Graham Oppy says something that he thinks there's still some sense that makes sense. I agree in the way he thinks about it, that it makes sense. But I won't go into how it, but generally the qualitative interpretation is better. So it's not the idea that the more complex number of things, that it becomes unlikely. If that's the best theory to explain something, then that is. And the reason why the multiverse might be posited as simpler is because it follows the trend of physicalism. It also is indicated by many scientific theories. Furthermore, we already have a physical universe. So positing more physical universe is a continuation of our background data, whereas a timeless, spaceless, immaterial mind is completely contrary to that. The qualitative interpretation of Occam's razor would say it's actually more simpler, positing more universes versus inventing this spooky, mysterious, unknown substance called a mind, an immaterial mind, timeless immaterial mind. Yeah.
All right, Martin, there's one correction to be made on the what was that you talked about, multiverse, right? So multiverse theory is not supported by any evidence, by the way, right?
Yeah.
and it is only supported by other theories. For example, string theory predicts it, but string theory itself is not proven, right? So you just can't move into multiverse theory. And probably in 1990s, late 90s, or maybe early 2000s, there was this cosmic microwave background mapping, and where there was some scientists thought that some cold spot blueprint were pointing to our universe having collided with some other universe. But then other scientists are of the opinion that this is just a random variation in the temperature within the our universe, so it does not necessarily indicate a collision, and therefore it doesn't indicate or point to a multiverse theory. So yeah, I mean, just to say that even though quite a few either atheists or even theistic cosmologists might say something, whether it's a good theory or bad theory or whatever, right? Whether they support it or not, I think it's still just a very speculative
Yeah.
hypothesis, right?
I mean, I did
This,
kind
yeah.
of allude to that. I probably mentioned evidence at some point. I think some people do. I think Phil Harper had mentioned that there is some evidence, but it's very
Yeah,
weak.
no, that was this evidence that I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah,
That
yeah. It's kind of
yeah,
semantics.
microwave, yeah,
Exactly.
cosmic microwave background, CMB background, right?
It's kind of like semantics, though, in that sense that different
Mhm.
people call different things evidence. I think Phil Harper meant like it was suggestive or something. In that, I was using it in that loose kind of sense as well. I did mention it's speculative, and that they think that certain models of the universe might support it, etc. But the main takeaway was not whether there's evidence behind it. But the main takeaway was that it's not generated out of theist versus atheism. There's no evidence to support that claim, right? That this was just conjured up by atheists to rival the God hypothesis or something. No, it wasn't. It was based on scientific thinking.
Right. I mean, it arose from different theories, and at some point, some would say that it arose out of the necessity of countering the fine tuning as well, right? But yeah, I think we'll leave it at that right there. Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Did this piece of paper feel any pain? Well, obviously not. The question is why? Well, actually, the answer is very simple. This piece of paper is made up of a bunch of physical nonsense materials, meaning all the parts that make up the paper do not have sensibility, it does not have any emotions. But the question is, if we humans are also made up of the same physical nonsense materials as this piece of paper, why is it that we feel emotions? We feel sadness. Many atheists like to point to the brain, say that the brain is the area where we can feel these emotions. But this actually puts the question back even further. Why is it that the brain is able to give us these feelings when it is also made up of the same physical nonsense materials? And I think the only way to get out of this dilemma is in believing a personal, all-powerful, all-knowing God who has a will. And this is the Quranic answer. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا, that Allah taught Adam everything. The only way to get out of this dilemma is to believe in a personal God who taught us emotions and taught us how to understand consciousness.
Any takers, Kelly?
I mean, his response is wrong on so many levels. I don't know,
Yeah.
because particularly with the end that the closing was very strange, particularly the wording that he used. And I think we will repeat what he said because it's very important. I don't know, did he intend to say that? But, and particularly the verse that he used. So I want to address that as well. But so I think he asked a simple question. Okay, does this paper have emotions? He said, or feel something? He said, no, but we are also made up of the same stuff. Then why do we feel? I think it's kind of a this way of articulating this question is very strange, and I would say nonsensical in the sense of
I
being
think it's like very
absurd.
naive, I would say.
Yeah,
It's
because
very
it's
naive.
like saying, well, you know what, this rock, this slab of silicon is made up of silicon, and your computer is also made of silicon, but the silicon does not perform any calculations or computations. But how does the computer does these computations? Well, because it is in a very specific way, it fulfills some sort of conditions there, and under certain conditions, in a certain order, it will be able to do something. So your question about, okay, paper is made up of the same thing, we are made up of the same material, so why doesn't paper feel it, or why if paper doesn't feel it, why do we feel it? So the way that he has put this question is very nonsensical in the meaning of being very stupid. So I think if he could have said that, okay, uh, we are material beings, but the emotions and the consciousness that we feel is not something material. But then, if we are made up of simply material things, then why do we feel? Why do we have these emotions, which is essentially non-material? So I think that is something now. Now, what they have to do is they have to prove. Now, what we can do is we scientists have been experimenting with the brain for, I mean, ever since they have had this technology. And of course, science has not conclusively proven that consciousness resides within the brain. But there are so many indications with all of these experiments, all of the scientific experiments that are done on the brain, with all the neurological problems that people go through, all the any physical damages that happen to the brain, and the result that we observe, all of these things seem to indicate, now it is an indication, but all of these points toward the fact that consciousness resides within the brain. Now he wants to say that no, why is that? How is it that a non-material thing, uh, how do we actually feel it, although we are made up of matter only? Well, the thing is, if you believe in dualism, how does a non-material thing actually interacts with the material thing? So essentially, and this is called, I think, the problem of interaction, right? The interaction problem. I don't know if that's what it's called. So the and this is very and this brought this up over here is because if the non-material, what you consider non-material, is able to somehow interact with the material, then it has some sort of nature where it can interact with material or matter, which means now what you don't, or what we are not sure of, is whatever consciousness is, we don't completely understand it. What causes it to sort of arise exactly, we're not sure of that as well. But we're not sure about everything in the universe. Maybe there are people, or there are even non-believing atheist scientists who believe that there could be subtle sort of reality, subtle sort of existence within the universe, which could be what makes us feel and have the consciousness. So there are many other theories, many other ways to look at it than just jumping to the conclusion, no, we can only explain this because if
Mm.
God exists, or through God. So I don't think it makes any sense to just jump to that conclusion. Yeah, I mean, it is one of the possible explanations. Me being an agnostic, I could understand that. Okay, you believe that that is one of the explanation, but that doesn't follow that you cannot say that this is the only possible explanation. That's what I would say. I mean, you guys, you know,
Yeah.
gave me your thought, but then I'll also have something to say about how he ended it
Yeah.
with the
I
verse.
would
I want
say,
to say something about
yeah.
that as well.
I would say consciousness being linked to the brain is well known and pretty much established, and the consciousness being the product of the brain is well known and well established. What might be not well known is how, right? What it's mysterious how the brain does it, but I don't think there is any doubt whatsoever that consciousness is linked to the brain, and the brain, there is some sort of mind body dependence, mind brain dependence. That's not in doubt. Yeah, neurophysiology, neuroscience, cognitive science, and most physicalists, they're pretty much on a consensus that the brain has some significant link, undoubtedly, to the consciousness. They don't believe in this idea of that consciousness resides somewhere else, or consciousness comes first and then everything else arises, or something. Some sort of idealism or something, or that the ground of reality, the ground of all reality, is consciousness. That we're all in this kind of massive, kind of Hindu god type mind, right? Like Bishop Berkeley's idea of idealism. Nobody's on that front anymore. I think it's pretty conclusive at the very minimum that the consciousness is something to do with the brain. I think that part is well known. Exactly how the brain turns, non-conscious matter into conscious events is the hard problem. So the soft problem, what we're talking about right now, what I said is the easy problem. Sorry, I should not soft problem. The easy problem has been solved. We know which sort of areas of the brain leads to which sort of conscious experiences, and I don't think it's mere correlation either. I think causation has been identified as well. We've done double dissociation type experiments where we stopped other parts of the brain and we've actually isolated regions of the brain to show that, in fact, do you do this at brain, or you do this at this nerve, and this sort of conscious kind of excitation happens, and this sort of experience gets reported, right? That is, I think, well established. So the easy problem has been solved. It's the hard problem, which is how does this, what Petrit said, these non-conscious things, entities that have dimensions, that have weight and shape, produce things that don't have any shape or dimensions or weight, doesn't conduct electricity, seems to be this kind of intangible thing. How does tangible things lead to? Yeah, that's the difficult part, I think. But
I think he used a very, very denigrating phraseology for it.
Yeah.
He used physical nonsensical material, right? Quote unquote, right? So that has a problem, because he starts off with saying this is a nonsensical material, and within nonsensical material we are made, but we are conscious, and nonsensical material, that is paper, is unconscious. And now this is false equivalence, by the way, right? I mean, he's just talking about just the material, not the composition. I think there are compositions. Of course, coal is made of carbon, and so is diamond. But diamond is different than the coal,
of course,
right?
Yeah, and we've
So
talked about
there is a structural differentiation, right? And different structural, combinations create different things, different behaviors. So he keeps, he has just not maybe thought through it very deeply about it, right?
Let me just say another thing. Yeah, you're right. It's the configurations, and that's why we know it's the brain, because it's the particular configuration of the brain that seems to have this kind of conscious link to consciousness. It's not other configurations, and that's wholly consistent with the remainder of science, in the sense that that's all we see in science. The same matter configured in different ways leads to different results. So clearly there's a particular type of configuration of the brain that leads to conscious experience, and we should not be too surprised at that. But the surprise is that, unlike other forms of matter, it's all physical. Here we're having something non-physical, but that's the issue. That's the begging of the question. Physicalists, a lot of physicalists don't actually think anything non-physical is happening, right? Let me just put it properly here. The hard problem is presented as a surface level problem, just like any problem is posited in any sort of discipline, right? Where it seemingly seems like the brain, the mind is separate from the brain, or mental activity is intangible, it's not material, feelings cannot be quantified, feelings are not made of atoms and molecules, feelings don't have any weight, doesn't conduct electricity. That's the problem. I get it. I accept it as well. And I present it all the time as well when I talk about it. I present it like that in great enthusiasm, to even when there's like young kids around, when I'm talking about philosophy with them. I say, what do you think about this? This is an issue, isn't it? However, the physicalist position that is that these are not non-material things, right? It seems to be a non-material thing, but nothing non-material is actually happening. And that's where you have arguments from people like what's his name, David Papenauer, the causal closure of physics, the problem of having multiple different types of causes and causation. What did he call it now? I forgot the name. What he called it, the argument now. The idea is that the theist would beg the question by presenting it like this, by asserting that in fact there is a mind-body distinction, right? But that's the theist position on dualism. The physicalist who believes in monism, right, which is that there's only one substance, which is physics, doesn't think there's these non-physical things. The physicalist is actually saying that it's an illusion to think that we have that these things, like dreams, and like I'm imagining a pink unicorn right now. Well, clearly this pink unicorn is not the same thing as a real unicorn, right? The real unicorn, well, there's no real unicorn. Okay, let me give a better example. A horse. I'm imagining a horse right now. Clearly this imaginary horse is different from the real horse. The real horse has a mass. It's made out of atoms. It can decompose. It occupies space and time. Whereas this imaginary horse, where is it? right? It doesn't seem to be, is gravity acting upon it? But the physicalist would say the imaginary horse is physical, yeah, in the sense that it's a nervous system reaction of a brain process. It's seated in the brain. Nothing non-physical is happening. It's an illusion to think that this is a non-physical thing, right? At least very, very hard physicalists, they would say that, right? So the crux of his point rests upon an intuition that these things are separate. But when you follow arguments that Papenawa makes, which is argument from physics and the causal closure of physics, and how you can't have two different type of causes concurrently running at the same time, right? Because if you have mental activity that leads to an action, and then you're simultaneously saying that the nervous system releases one chemical, the nervous system acts upon your muscles on your body and then grabs the bottle, and simultaneously saying there's another set of causes, which is mental activity, which is you think that there's a bottle and you want to get that bottle and you aim for it, target for it, and you grab it and you bring it. But there's two separate lines of causation, right? And this is I remember now what I was saying. Overdetermination. This is an overdetermination of causes, right? Now you've got two concurrent things, and one of them is definitely wasteful, right? The simpler explanation is what we already know, rather than positing this extra dualistic interpretation on it, which is that when you feel thirsty and you act to get a drink, it's identical to your nervous system firing firing something in your body and then making you want to get it. Those things are identical. Now, somebody may say, what do you mean identical? They're clearly separate things, right? In one case, I'm intending something, and the other. It's identical in the same way that H2O is also water with its watery effects. You can understand that water is wet and it has this wet effect, right? But at the same time, it's H2O molecules, right? The statement that H2O, like if I came up with this chemical description of what's happening there, will be a lot of scientific jargon, is identical to the statement, water is wet or something. And it's in the same sense. Those are identical statements. That there's a question of it's a question of perspective then, and how we're looking at it. So the physicalist would simply say there isn't any immaterial mind here. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I would put it like this. Now, just again, I'm looking for some similar things that we could think of. So, for example, and I mean, it's just something. I just want to give some people to think about something, and it is in a way similar, but it's not exactly similar. It's quite different, but just want to give something to the people to think about. So, for example, energy is massless. It doesn't interact with what you'll call the Higgs field. But mass does, and energy can be converted to mass. Now, so there is a Higgs field as an entire field, which is to which this energy is sort of invisible. In the form of energy, the same thing is completely invisible. It does not interact with it in any way. But then when it's converted into mass, it interacts with it. So there are things that can happen under certain conditions, which could make that thing a thing into to behave in a very different way. So I just want to sort of make people think about how even in our material understanding of the world, there could be things which are essentially different.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
it's the same thing.
Yeah, you can be a physicalist who believes in emergentism and
Exactly.
believe that. So you can believe that there are mental properties then, right? They're not
Exactly.
just identical to physical stuff, right?
Yes.
It emerges out of So the first position that I talked about wasn't that, right?
Mhm.
Those physicalists actually think that there isn't any. They're not denying consciousness. They're not denying the fact that you can dream or imagine. They think imagination is just a physical process. It's a physical process, right? Whereas there are some physicists who think imagination is an emergence from physical processes. Imagination or feelings or thoughts emerges out of. So it is a separate thing that comes from the physics, but ultimately reducible to physics, right? So
I
there
think
is some.
there is another
Yeah,
camp that is panpsychism, basically,
I was
right?
going to
And
talk about
they
that. I was going to talk about that. Yeah, I was going to talk about that. Yeah, just
Yeah, yeah. And panpsychism is basically simplest thing. So I'll just put it,
yeah.
quickly, so that if you want to jump in.
That's not a camp of
So
physicalism, though. I think.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So no, I was just saying that even panpsychism is a possibility. You don't
Yes.
have to, appeal to God,
Yeah.
basically. A certain
Absolutely.
certain collection or certain configuration of matter that we have already talked about.
Yeah.
Every atom, every fundamental particle is probably conscious. We don't know, but in a certain particular arrangement, such as brains,
Yeah.
human or animal brains, it imparts the quality of
Yes.
consciousness. That's
So,
about
so,
it.
so, so you're correct. Like Petrit Kola says that the only logical. No, if you're going to talk about a priori logical, not based on probabilities, not inductive data, not what's actually real, not Bayesian arguments, just a priori, then you got to logically exclude every other possibility. Like it's either A or B, right? But has
Yeah,
he
I
logically,
think he doesn't understand this
yeah,
properly.
has he logically exhausted all conceivable possibilities?
No, not at
Nobody's
all.
saying
Not at all. We have given already three different
yeah, nobody's saying
possibilities.
panpsychism. Yeah, nobody's saying panpsychism is true, or even probable, or even minutely probable, even negligently probable. It's probably absurd. It sounds like stupidity, right? It's cosmic
Yeah,
nonsense. But if we're going to talk about a priori logical deductions, it's clearly a contender on the table that he's not logically excluded, which is what you've characterized correctly as well, which is that it could very well be that it's not the case that we're just going from matter, then suddenly emerging this consciousness, in which case it doesn't make sense, which is the problem that he's trying to articulate. It doesn't make sense that how could nonsense, non-mental things create mental things. Rather, under the worldview on panpsychism is that every entity, every particle, it might be down to an atom, might be down to a quark, I don't know, but there is some semblance of consciousness in each of them. They're not so it's a bit like in aggregate, when they bind together in certain configurations, then they become like grander forms of consciousness, but they minutely tiny insignificantly exist in specks fundamentally at bottom, which defeats this entire problem in the first place of how do you go from non-conscious to conscious, because there'll be a conscious, every particle possesses a conscious quality, right? In which case this is a logical possibility, like you said. And how do you disprove this? No, you can't. You can't just say so. Petrit Kola's argument doesn't do that. He doesn't address it, right? So it's not the case that God is the only logical possible thing. But sorry, go on, Karim. Yeah.
I also wanted to sort of explain this possibility in another way, and I want to run this by you. So, with how I think about it is this now, and this is another different kind of point. What Petrit Kola is saying is that the only possible explanation for this is conscious. This is God. I think now there could be two understandings that I can have from this. Either he's making this that I think it's the argument, the principle of sufficient, the proportional. What was the principle that we discussed in the last? The principle of proportionate causality, right? It
He's not.
was.
He's not grounding on that. That's a very, very
Yeah,
loose argument. He
exactly.
has no
And
idea
he
of
he
this.
didn't argue on that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that could have been one possibility, but he does not seem to be arguing from that. So the second point, what he seems to be arguing from, is that there's somehow something sort of, I would use the word magical. It is so magical that this can only be done by something like God. And I think this is where we need to push back. And I think what how I would like to put a question to theists who think like that. And I would ask them, okay, whatever this whatever we are, whatever causes this consciousness to exist or somehow, and interact with our body, let's call it a configuration. Okay, however this non-material reality works together with the material reality or material or matter to give rise to this human form that we have, who have this conscious experience. Is this a logically possible configuration to exist? Is God doing something logically impossible? I believe not. And if it is logically possible,
Yeah.
then why do you think it's not. If it's logically possible, then I mean, why would you think that it's something
Yeah,
magical? It's logically
I was going
possible.
to say the same thing. I was going to
Yeah.
say the
No,
same thing.
even I'll go even one step further. Is it physically possible? I think that would be the question. Is it
I would not use
physically
the word
impossible?
physical because they might push back
It's
on
not
that.
even
I mean,
possible.
we can discuss
But
that. But let's. Yeah.
you're absolutely right, Kylie, because that's what I think
Yeah.
as well. I was going to say that. I was
Okay.
thinking that before you spoke, and that's going to be
Yeah.
my next point. I wanted to mention the
Yeah.
exact same thing, which is
Yeah.
that there's no logical impossibility from thinking.
No, no, I totally agree.
Yeah,
That's completely, that's completely defensible position, right? You can say that it's logical. I would say, why do you think it's physically impossible, right? I think you have to give uh, supporting case for that. You
yeah.
haven't
And I
given
was
any
going to say,
Yeah.
supporting
Yeah.
case
But
for
that's.
that.
yeah,
I agree, but I mean, I think it again. We have already sort of covered that point. I think I
Mhm.
slightly maybe, but I think what we are discussing right now, it's a slightly different point, which is,
Mhm.
do you think it's logically impossible for this kind of configuration to happen, where a material thing or we as matter also have this consciousness, which
yeah.
according to them is
Well,
non-material.
immaterial consciousness arising out of matter. There's
Yeah,
nothing logically impossible about that. It's not like a square triangle. I can't conceive a
exactly.
square and a triangle. It's not like a horse and a non-horse existing, where a horse and a horse at the same place not existing. I can't conceive a horse at the same time without thinking the horse is not there as well. Sorry, at the simultaneous thinking the horse is not there as well. I just can't imagine that. However, I can imagine matter, right? Here, nerve fires, and then I think, right? There's nothing logically impossible about that, right? So there's no absurdity there. Some people might say that it's not a logical problem. It's a substance problem. It's going from one substance to another. Like how from atoms, a physical object, electrons, quarks, whatever you want to call it, molecules, and then suddenly you have feelings. But it's not logically impossible. It's definitely a mystery. That's why it's called the hard problem. But there's no logical problem. It's not an impossibility, right? So if there's no impossibility, what's the problem? Well, the problem just is a matter of trying to kind of understand how from a completely different substance you get arise another substance. But this is only if you accept that there are actually two substances, right, in the world. That there is the mental substance, and you're a dualist of some kind. Some physicalists are property dualists. It's very popular. Property dualists, but there are physicalists who are not property dualists. They don't think there are two. They're monists. They believe there's only one substance, and it's just the physical. And the consciousness in the popular sense we understand it, in the common sense view, just like free will in the common sense view, the libertarian concept of free will is nonsense. And similarly, the Descartesian concept of mind, where you have this robotic type of organismic thing that encases this other thing, another substance, which is the theater of all experiences, right? And there's the two separate substances. So you have the organism, the body, and the mind. The mind-body separation is a false distinction. The mind and the body are not separate things. The mind is a part of the body, and the mind is the same substance as of the body as well. And they're physicalists who think that, right? And neither of them are logically impossible.
And I think my approach to that would be, asking them, is it something logically impossible, as you've already covered? It's not just about, why do you think it's logically impossible? My question would be, do you think this happening is something that was logically impossible and God was able to do it? Because even most theists think that God cannot do logically impossible things. So then that necessarily means that it is logically possible.
Yeah. And
And yeah.
here I also put forward the idea that, I put forward the idea that there is a problem of symmetry as well here. Because if you think that it's very difficult to imagine minds come from non-minds, then it's also because of the interaction problem, because of there is no potential. Let's say there's no mind potential in non-minds. So how does suddenly a array of physical causes lead to a non-physical cause? But at the same time, you can reverse the position. It's the symmetry. We need a symmetry breaker here, right, in order to show that it's not the same the other way around. If you have just a spaceless, timeless, mental, non-physical mind, from that, how does an atom just come out of it? If there's just a mind, there is no atoms, there's no matter, there's no molecules. There aren't these spatial.
Yeah, I think the reverse problem is good as well. I think that's a good objection to their case, right? How did God create the universe, basically, right?
Yes. And if they think God has a power to turn his non-physical self, or I don't know if his self, I don't know how to describe this, but he has the power from
essence, or maybe it already existed for eternity, whatever that means, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. So if it existed for eternity, then the same problem arises. How does God turn matter into non-matter at some point?
Yeah, or non-matter into matter, like from how does it?
Yeah, but these are not positions open to most theists, right? God created matter, right? So we can't go in for at least Muslims. I don't think God existed alongside a clump of matter existing with him. He created everything, right? So the question is, where did that come from? Well, he had the power to create matter. What is that power? So there was some necessary and sufficient conditions to create, and they don't know the answer how. They don't have any mechanisms, they don't have any explanation, they just say God did it, right? Well, is that any different from the atheistic naturalistic view, which is that from matter there was some sort of necessary and sufficient conditions that gave rise to
non-matter entity?
Non-matter. Yeah, I would say that the latter position is better because already God is a sketchy theory, right? We at least know we have the matter, but the best arguments for physicalism aren't a priori logical arguments. They're actually inductive and abductive and Bayesian arguments, right? For physicalism, right? Instead of finding out what's logically possible and excluding all logical possibilities, what's more probable should be the question, right? And when you look at that, we've got lines of evidence supporting the case for naturalism to explain the mind, right? On theism, God did not have to create minds through physical processes. God has more than one way to create minds, right? On atheism, or naturalism, if you want to call it, atheistic naturalism, the only way a mind can form is if it is connected to some sort of physical substrate, right? So on theism, it's more unlikely. It doesn't predict, it's not a prediction of theism that God would create minds. He could have just created a world, immaterial world. He could have just created disembodied minds, right? That option's available to him. So whenever a theory has more than one likelihood, more than one option, it doesn't predict one option from that multiplicity of options, because it becomes more unlikely. When another theory has less options, it becomes that theory is more likely to predict the data. I gave it. I don't want to go on a rant again, but I gave examples of if who robbed the house. Was it a homeless man or Stephen Hawking? No, sorry, was it a homeless man or was it Bill Gates? And if there's multiple ways of robbing a house, and the evidence suggests that the house was broken into in the most reckless way, and Bill Gates had millions of options to rob the house, then the theory that the homeless man did it is more likely. This is used in everyday criminal cases, court cases, right? It doesn't make sense for a rich person to rob a house in this manner. The evidence fits the crime. The crime scene evidence fits the homeless man because he's got less resources. He broke in through the back door, whereas the criminal genius didn't have to do that. So it's very unlikely. And in the same sense, God didn't have to do it like that. God has multiple options. It doesn't really predict the naturalistic way, which is that for billions of billions of years, we're not going to see anything, and then eventually we have complex life, and then it evolves, and then you have this stage by stage process of this kind of this solid object forming in a skull, right, type thing, and then it gets bigger and bigger, and there's lots of evidence showing that the physiological and anatomical the links to behaviors and psychological progress and intelligence throughout, time, right? As hominids form, they build better and greater tools. So there's clearly a link between intelligence and the brain skull size developing. That's something that fits the atheistic picture, not the theistic picture, which God didn't have to do any of that, right? And then you have evidence from childhood to adulthood, right? If God created consciousness, He didn't have to make it progressively develop with the size of the brain. Whereas on atheism, right, based on the evolutionary picture, you would predict that based on evolution. The brain, because of birth rates and so on, the maturation of the brain started happening after birth. Right, unlike other animals, which they could be birthed and they can start, getting up and fending for itself. They reach developmental maturity or some level of maturity quite quickly. We are kind of like feeble for like at least 8 years, maybe even 20 years nowadays. yeah, and just mentally not equipped to our brain matures. That's again a prediction of atheistic naturalistic science. Right, on physicalism, but it's not a prediction of theism. So we see that with brain development, you have greater and greater forms of consciousness. Right, when you're a baby, you have less conscious bandwidth, if you want to call it. Then you become 5, and with brain development, your consciousness somewhat develops. Then you become 18, it further develops. Clearly, there's another set of evidence again that supports atheism.
I think there is a correlation between number of neurons that your brain has as you grow up and up to the adulthood, and when it starts to decline. So you see a clear change in your conscious abilities, right?
That's right.
Right. So
as well,
how many neurons does an average adult has? Probably 80 billion or something like that. I don't know, but whatever that number be, right? It's much smaller in your childhood. For animals which have lesser consciousness, as we say, the numbers are lesser, right?
Exactly.
And then this neuron number is not only dependent on. Sorry, Kelly. Yeah.
I think that is generally the trend, but it's not.
There are some caveats, right?
And this is also in proportion to their body size, and that trend is generally
there are
true,
certain
but
caveats as to which part of the brain they are in.
the
whether number of
the specific part of the brain,
neurons,
actually, that depends.
Yeah, then so there is a number of neurons as well as the number of synapses, right? So how many connect to the synapses, basically? So there are quite a few parameters, but these correlations usually hold, right? And that's what I'm saying, right? Usually these correlations hold.
Yeah, I would say it's causation because we have isolated other variables and reduced it down to those things. That's how we identify causation. We isolate all other variables and see if A leads to B. And if you isolate all the variables in any scientific experiment, C, D, E, F, G, and only change A and it has an impact on B, that's how we identify causation, not merely correlation. So we've got
No. I'm saying consciousness has a correlation with the number of synapses versus number of neurons and which part of the brain they are more structure of them, and then the size versus weight of the brain, brain to body size. And then, of course, the causation is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, the causation when you get and the other I think J.L. Mackie, the philosopher J.L. Mackie said, God could have equipped our consciousness to a rock, to a tree, to anybody and nobody. It could be disembodied, right? So he made the same sort of point, and many other people like Paul Draper make it into an abductive argument from that, thinking that clearly the theory of God predicts multiple different ways it could have realized conscious creatures, whereas the theory of naturalism has only one sort of story that it can that it has, and that story is the one that we have lots of evidence for as well. We've got a confirmed evolutionary history. We've got skull size changes. We've got that, so it's consistent with that. Therefore, it doesn't fit the God model very well, but it fits the atheistic naturalistic evolutionary model. Yeah, and then the more you look at that, the more you see that there are hallmarks of evolutionary blueprints, ancestral blueprints in our consciousness. For example, cognitive biases that make sense in the savannah, where it was functional, that we still carry today as a vestigial trait, right? It could be anything like an optical illusion, or even things like, for example, dyslexia, right? Or our certain things that like the hiccup, you know,
or even our racial biases,
racial biases. Yeah, exactly. The tribalism. You know,
the
these are
tribalism, right?
part of our consciousness in some sense, part of our mental, and we take mental shortcuts as well. Make mental shortcuts, and evolutionary psychologists and so on. They've got really good way of identifying why this is good, well explained under maybe like a trait that's gone redundant over time, or there's a mismatch between today's society and what previously was the case. Like we're not adapted for language at all, right? We're not adapted for language, and hence why we've got so many people who are dyslexic, because we evolved in a time where we didn't evolve through writing. We didn't communicate through writing and symbols and so on. And similarly, stuff like our addiction to sugar, right? Everybody's consciousness, everybody's personality, even, you know, has a addiction to, or a attraction to sugar, right? Sugar, that's and why? Because it's a source of energy.
We needed it to run longer and longer,
Yeah,
basically.
and we need it today as well. We need it today, but we don't need it as much. But what's happened
Yeah,
is,
no, we are not living the same lifestyle that the humans of Savannah were living.
Exactly.
They were
Where
they were
sugar was
running
very scarce.
longer.
No, we
longer
don't have.
distances.
Plus, we don't have these carb rich. We didn't have these carb dense foods previously, basically
Yes,
available
yes.
to us.
Yeah. So the whole point of evolutionary theory is that there wouldn't be a beneficial adaptation if it's disadvantageous. But clearly, sugar is disadvantageous, right? To some extent, because we eat too much of it, or it's too about, you know, like sugar causes decay, cause blood pressure, it could cause diabetes, and so on and so forth. So how is this a positive adaptation? No, because in fact it's a very good evidence of evolution, because if evolution occurred, and if it's an adaptation, we should find this adaptation to be beneficial for us.
No,
Right?
it was still a good adaptation at that time.
Yes,
Mahadan, it was a good adaptation at that time,
that's
because
what I'm saying, right?
yeah.
Because the theory is, when did this adapt, right? But the thing is, it's not a just so story. We can just make up a story, right? Saying, well, it was good maybe in the past. That's not science. We're just making something up, right? In fact, the data shows that these adaptations fully, formed at a time where sugar was shot. We can trace the traits to that period, right? We see it in other animals, etc. So there's good grounds to think that this adaptation that we have towards sugar existed a long time ago. It's that environment that should show that it's actually positively beneficial. And the prediction would be, if it's true, if evolution has to be true in this area, yeah, it could be falsified. We should see that in that area it was positive. And in fact, that's what we see, because it was scarce. It's scarce. It takes time to find and hunt, and it's not as dense as Kylie said, and whatever, right? In today's artificial environment, which superseded the evolutionary time, and again, that's a prediction of evolution as well. If there is there's a collision between our urges, our adapted urges, and it becoming disadvantageous, it should only be because the environment has drastically changed. We're in a different environment where it's not fit in that environment, and voila, that's what we see as well. Again, so it's not a just so story that we just created. It's predicted by the evidence, and that's part of our consciousness. Again, that's a blueprint. It's a hallmark of our consciousness. It's because it's part of your. I don't know how I'm going to describe it as part of your consciousness, but I would say it's part of your personality, and therefore it's linked to your consciousness, right? Because it's seated in our brains. And again, it suggests that therefore our consciousness, again, all of this evidence intertwines with each other, and there's millions and millions and millions of evidence like this telling us that this is an evolved trait. And if it's suggesting it's an evolved trait, then I don't think that fits a theistic model. I don't think evolution fits a theistic model. If brain development and consciousness fits evolution, then clearly that that
That
there's
negates the theistic model,
prediction
right?
of
Right.
naturalism, not prediction of. It's more likely on naturalism versus theism.
Okay, let's move on to this last one, Martin. Shall we, or shall we close the stream now?
It's up to you. If I can do one more if you want. Yeah.
Kelly?
I mean, I don't know if we're already sort of touching the 2-hour mark, and I think we have covered sort of Petrit Kola's videos today, so I'm not sure if.
Yeah,
I think
this
we
is
can
Mansoor's, right?
we can
the
close
last one.
for today.
I think yeah, we can do that.
Let's just close for today.
Yeah, we can do that. Is this short though? Is it really short?
It's I think you posted it, right? And so this is probably short. I don't know. It's a short, right? But
if you guys have got maybe 10
so
minutes.
maybe just before 2-hour mark, we should aim to finish the stream, right? So if we can do that, then maybe we can just cover it, right?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, Kelly, shall we?
Yeah, okay.
That there's a God. I'm also a scientist. I need like concrete facts, concrete truths to give me the evidence to make me say, okay, 100% I'll bet all my money there is a God. Because I don't think we have enough empirical evidence to make that claim.
Do you know gravity exists?
Yes.
What's the evidence for it? Scientific evidence. I don't accept anything else.
I'm not 100% sure. Could you please tell me?
There is none. Empirical evidence means what? We observe. Have we observed? Have we seen it? Have we tasted it? Have we felt it? Have we smelt it? With our 5 senses, we can't see, taste, feel gravity. All we know about gravity is the effect it produces. So gravity is not something that you can prove through observation. It's not tangible evidence for you. You're only extrapolating by looking at the effect it is having, and you're saying, there must be a cause for all of this. There has to be a cause for this pull, so there must be a gravitational pull. Now, you don't know what's pulling it because you can't see it. There is no such thing you're proven like there's a graviton. We're trying to establish what is a graviton, but we haven't done so yet. So there is no empirical evidence for it. Our principle is the same. We see the effect of our creator. There's a cause, and that's our creator. That's the originator. That's the one who assembles things, the necessary existence. So if you are okay with that level of evidence, then you have that evidence in front of you. That yes, just like I accept gravity, even though I haven't seen any gravitons, but I infer it from looking at the effect, you should be consistently doing also likewise and say, I can see there has to be a necessary existence through whose effect everything is assembled and transformed.
How can you?
Yeah, so I think very dumb. Okay, Martin, you go first.
Why me?
Because there is a feedback from your side.
No. You guys
go for it. Go for it.
I just finished giving a lecture. Yeah.
Go for it.
Kylie, do you want to go?
No, Philo, you said you were about to say something.
No. I was.
There's a lot of stupid stuff that he said. So
yeah, a lot
I mean, gravity not being proven empirically. Yeah. What the hell is he talking about?
Yeah. A lot of stupid stuff.
Does he know what empirical means?
First thing first is okay, Martin again.
No, Philo, go on.
Okay.
No, Martin, please go on mute because we're hearing a feedback from your side.
Because there is a huge feedback from your side. Okay, so first thing first, gravity, I don't know what he's understanding by gravity there, right? Gravity is exactly what it is, right? We describe a phenomenon which we feel and we call it gravity, right? It could be between a human being. Do you feel gravity? Yes, you feel gravity. You call you being attached to earth and not being thrown away or flown away out of it due to centripetal force. You describe it as gravity. You describe gravity as earth revolving around sun. That's gravity basically, right? Any two bodies, even these two guys standing next to each other, are probably experiencing gravity. They don't feel it perhaps. I mean, earth's gravity is much more tangible in that sense. So that's gravity. I mean, graviton is just a hypothesis to describe what gravity is. This is like a little bit more deeper into as to what might cause gravity, what is the cause of gravity. But to understand gravity, or that gravity exists as a hypothesis, all you need is two bodies, and one should be attracted to the other. That's about it. That's what gravity is. For Earth, it's at 9.8 meters per second square. For some other body, probably Mars, it's probably about 3.2 meters per second square or something like that, right? So I'm not quite sure exactly what his point is. Why bring gravitons here? Gravitons is a very different theory. It's just like what we were trying to describe. How do things feel mass? That's described by Higgs field. Similarly, scientists thought maybe gravity could be better explained by gravitons, right? It's gravitons, maybe a field of gravitons, probably. So that's another theory, but that doesn't negate the fact that you can feel gravity, right? And you can describe whatever you feel, a phenomenon, as gravity. And same is not true with God. I mean, maybe some people feel that there is a God. I can feel it. Different people have different experiences with different kinds of gods. Some people feel that they have had an encounter with Jesus. Some people say Brahma. Some people say maybe some Zeus or something else, maybe, right? Odin or whatever you may have. And that's not consistent with gravity. For gravity, I think everybody almost similarly feels that pull. So yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of bull over there.
Yeah. Well, as you said, gravity isn't the graviton theory. Gravity is just me dropping an apple and it falling. That visual observation that I've done, I'm describing the relationship of the fall to the ground based on its mass and so on. That's gravity, right? It's that phenomena, and that's observational, directly observational, right? Right. So I don't know what he's trying to say, that you can't see gravity. Nobody's saying that there's necessarily anything about.
I mean, he's talking about 5 different senses, and yes, one of the senses is our ability to feel being pulled by something. That's one of the
Not just
senses
feel,
that we have.
just see gravity. You can see gravity. You don't need to just feel
No,
gravity.
he even brought in, can you smell gravity? Can you touch gravity? Can you?
Right.
Is getting, maybe, I don't know. I don't want to use harsher words, but he's bringing nonsensical arguments, and he's getting applauded for those nonsensical arguments as well. That's the sad part, right?
Yeah. So we can observe this invisible force. We're not saying we're observing the the invisibility of the force visibly. We're seeing the effects of the invisible force, right? That we call gravity, and we can build mathematical models and to demonstrate its relationship to objects. That's it. It might be a mystery as to how that invisible force, why is it invisible and why, but that's it. It might not be something that is viewable through our retinal and eye range or vision range or whatever. It might not be a force that is visible. It might not have a visibility. It's just describing that relationship entirely, right? The things that it's commenting on, gravity is commenting on, is the objects falling. That's it. That there is a force, and we don't have anything similar to God. The things that you make argue are similar to God, like there is a force that causes, let's say, people to pray, and therefore things get better. We've debunked that through empirical research between prayer studies, seeing that there's a lack of correlation or even causation, etc. If there's an argument for, let's say, for example, that there is a force where you are thinking that you see a miracle, and it was somebody was resurrected or something, that's been debunked, right? Based on poor testimonies or evidence of mental hallucinations being more probable, more likely than the contender, which is that there was an actual violation of the laws of physics. So all those things have been debunked in a way that gravity hasn't, which can be observed. So I don't know, so he's trying to make the argument that, like gravity, we can look at the effects of the universe and posit that there's a hypothesis of a God. But the whole point is that hypothesis of God has been debunked based on other arguments. So but they're not the same. But I think Kylie was going to say something about it, what empirical is, and he's wrong. Not Kylie, I mean Mansoor is wrong to characterize empiricism as something that you merely just observe. Empiricism, just anybody Google it if you want. Empiricism is both
entails the
direct,
effects. Yeah, entails
yeah,
the.
is
I mean,
direct, direct observation and indirect observation as well.
yeah. Sorry, not entails, but it encompasses both direct as
Yeah,
well as indirect. Yeah.
indirect observation, right? Most of our science are considered empirical, but most of our sciences are indirect. We learn things through indirect observation, right? Like the Big Bang, we didn't directly see the Big Bang. We've seen the effects. The empirical evidence is those effects. It's the theory, right? That it all goes back to this small, dense, tiny point, 14.1, billion years ago, that explains these effects. That's the model, but the actual effects are empirical. The empirical evidence supports the theory. That's how we talk about it. We're not, so Mansoor might be trying to say that there's empirical evidence just like for these theories for God. Well, that's news to the entirety of science, because if it was, then it would be a scientific theory, and we don't have anything like that for God. There is no current scientific theory for God that's in the frontiers of science, or that anybody takes seriously. It doesn't, because it doesn't predict anything properly, and there's better models that are consistent with our background data, that are simpler, more parsimonious, doesn't posit extra entities that we've never seen, and that fits the data better. And that's why we posit those forms of data to explain things in the universe. Those theories to explain things in the universe, because they're more probable. Yeah.
All right, Kelly, if you want to add something, please. Then we should close the stream, right?
Nothing.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think then we are done with this one as well. Yeah, I don't think there's much more to add to it. It was just a stupid argument from Mansoor as usual, right? Anyway, so thank you everybody who's gonna see it, because not too many are watching it as of now.
Very quickly before we end, I think the atheist was stupid as well to say that you can't see, hear, touch, right? Because that gave
that is sometimes these. I think how is that guy a scientist? I mean, he's just probably a scientist, and he's being a true scientist, saying that how can you God doesn't exist because you can't see, touch, feel, whatever. And I think probably Mansoor's answer was on the similar lines, similar in a similar vein, pretty much. All right, Madin, Kelly, if nothing to add, then we shut down the stream for today.
Yeah.
All right, so anybody who's gonna watch, maybe not, then please like, subscribe and share. We do have a Hindi Urdu channel, which is youtube.com/@Philo Sapience, and then please do join us in our next stream whenever that happens, probably next Saturday or Sunday. Thank you very much.
Right.